Welcome back to the Todd Durkin Impact Show, and you are in for a treat today. My friends, buckle up your bootstraps. You have one heck of an episode today. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say, even though it's early in 2025, that this may be one of the top 5 episodes in all of 2025. It's that good. And her name is Cynthia Thurlow. And Cynthia Thurlow, if you have not heard of her, she has a great following, a big following. And while she hangs her hat in the nutrition world and in hormones and all the great things she does, it goes deeper than that. Cynthia Thurlow and I actually went to school together. And I didn't even know that, but looking back, we actually went to middle school in Brick, New Jersey together. She went on to this meteoric rise in the nutrition world. And as I reconnected with her last year, we talked about doing a little bit of a podcast swap so that I can go on her show, which she has an amazing show. We'll talk about her show and all that she's doing inside of the podcast. And obviously here on the Impact Show today, she is 100% someone that you must follow. There's no doubt you got to follow what Cynthia is doing because she is dropping some incredible wisdom across the globe. So take a listen to her bio. Cynthia Thurlow is a globally recognized expert in nutrition and intermittent fasting, highly sought after speaker, and the CEO and founder of the Everyday Wellness Project. She's been a nurse practitioner for 20 plus years, is a 2 times TEDx speaker. Wait till you hear that story and how it changed her world. Her second talk on intermittent fasting has been viewed over 15 million times. Yes, I said 15 million times. She's been featured on ABC, Fox 5, KTLA, CW, and in Medium and Entrepreneur magazines. She was recently listed in Yahoo Finance as one of the 21 founders changing the way we do business. She's also that host of the Everyday Wellness Podcast, which was listed as 20 podcasts that will help you grow back in 2020 by Entrepreneur Magazine, and in Business Insider 21 podcasts to expand your mind in 2021. Well, it's 2025, and let me tell you what, her world has exploded since then. And as an advocate for living a fulfilled, healthy, and well-balanced lifestyle, Cynthia has committed her career to serving women and men in their 30s and beyond. She's countering the notion that this is just how we age. Now settle and accept it. No, you don't have to live that way. And she is the one leading the way for change. As part of the endeavor, Cynthia brings over 20 years of medical experience combined with current and progressive nutritional perspectives, approaches to truly serve women and men frustrated with the status quo. Cynthia provides hope and customized programs that work. She selflessly and transparently and authentically shares her own personal experiences, yes she does, navigating hormonal imbalances, perimenopause, and all of the symptoms that plague so many women. She authentically connects to her clients and tribe. My friends, when you hear today's episode, I tell you what, when you talked about power packed with information, I'm going to keep the 4 quarters. We're going to talk mindset, we're going to talk health set. And health set, we're talking intermittent fasting, we're talking gut health, we're talking medicine 3.0, and so many specifics on what you can do to improve your nutrition and your overall health. We're going to talk leadership in business and what she's done in the business world to explode her brand with now over 500,000 followers and listeners on her podcast, her social media. She has a massive following and she's creating great impact. And lastly, we will talk about personal. We'll have the personal 4th quarter because personally, she's going to share her high performance routine. And you know, if you've listened to the podcast before and the Impact Show, what we stand for is high performance. And in this coaching, what I do is I want to bring out all the things that Cynthia Thurlow is doing so that she can help you be the best version of yourself. So without further ado, let's go back to the East Coast right now and let's tune in. Stay tuned. I hope you're working out, you're walking, or you're really tuned in because this is one special interview with my great friend from Brick, New Jersey, Cynthia Thurlow. All right, my friends, welcome back. I have the one, the only Cynthia Thurlow on the line. I am so excited. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Todd. I've really been looking forward to this conversation for so many different reasons.
What's one of the reasons?
There is nothing more exciting to me than being able to connect with individuals that I grew up with that are from the same part of New Jersey, because there's something really special about people that are from that part of New Jersey. And
Amen. Amen.
it's values, it's the camaraderie, it's your ride or die friends. And
Amen.
so when I think about over the course of my lifetime, I've had a lot of amazing friends, but my ride or die are my childhood friends.
Truth.
Without question.
What's awesome about this conversation, when Cynthia and I reconnected about a year ago in 2024, she said, Todd, did you know we went to middle school together? I said, wait, what? You went to Veterans Memorial Middle School? She goes, yes, we went to middle school together. She goes, I was the shy, quiet one. You were kind of the athlete guy and that. And I'm like, wait a second, what? So she's from Brick, New Jersey, so I could not be more excited to speak today. And if you follow Cynthia, we'll give all of the information at the end. She's done an amazing job with her business and brand, and coming from from the whole nursing side of things as a nurse practitioner, now as an expert in nutrition. You're in for a real treat today. And Cynthia, I can't tell you how excited I am. And when I shared it with my wife, Melanie, she's like, of course I know Cynthia Thurlow. Everyone follows Cynthia, right? So she was excited, and we're excited to have you on the Impact Show. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's funny. I married to Todd as well. So when I said to my team, because I had a standing team meeting right before this, I said I have to jump off and talk to Todd. And they were like, wait a minute, isn't Todd snowboarding? I said, no, different Todd. Different childhood Todd. So, to me, it is very serendipitous and really a pleasure. We were talking before we started recording about how much synergy, people that we have, mutual friends that have just come up. And so I'm so glad that we were able to reconnect.
No doubt.
Talk about topics that are near and dear to my heart.
Well, Cynthia, as I was sharing earlier, with the Impact Show, we have 4 quarters. Just like in football or sport, we have 4 quarters. The first one's mindset. And I want to pick your mindset before we go into all of your great nutritional content that you have. Mindset, because in the last 20 years, and specifically even the last 5 years, and we'll talk branding at the end, and the leadership and business side, but mindset-wise, when it comes to mindset and motivation, is there a quote or mantra that you live by? Is there something that has allowed you to really put yourself on the map, both on the nurse practitioner side as well now in the nutrition side? Is there a quote that you live by?
Yeah, it's something my dad used to say. My dad passed last year, but it makes it even more poignant now. Through great risk comes great reward. And so that is the way I have lived my life. I didn't do what most of my peers did, which is not to suggest it wasn't the right decision for them, but for me, I've done that path less traveled in many ways. Veering off when people expected me to zig, I zagged, and it's been that way. It has turned out to be fortuitous, because it has allowed me to evolve and grow into the person that I am today. I think that in many ways, because I was willing to take calculated risks, I have ended up really carving out a very unique niche for not only myself, but for my family as well. And I would say my father's words ring true today as they did 35 years ago, when he was really encouraging and pushing me hard, which he was. He was one of those people that had very high standards, and for which I'm grateful. But that quote to me, as of late, really worked, because I now parrot it to my children. They hate hearing that. But I will say to them, don't play small. Message, don't play small.
Well, yeah. And heck, we have kids around the same age, so we were talking about that prior to as well. And when it comes with great risk comes great reward. What's a specific example that you say in the last 5 years or so that you've taken a great risk?
I think it was probably about 6 years ago. As an introvert, I'm going to do a calculated risk. I'm going to do a TED Talk. And for some reason, that terrified me. Get up on stage and commit something to memory, because I'm not a memorizer by nature. I could never have done dramatic theater, because I would get up on stage and be like, what am I supposed to be saying? And so I did end up doing one TED Talk, and then I agreed to do a second. And prior to that second TED Talk, I had gotten very ill. I spent 13 days in the hospital. And no one would have questioned if I had said, I'm going to opt out of doing this. But because I had been so sick and had almost died, I remember saying to my husband, I'm doing the second talk with the intention of showing my kids I'm okay. Because they were terrified. Being in the hospital, being in the ICU, being so sick. And I recall my youngest at the time came with me to do this talk. And I remember saying to him, that's the worst talk I've ever done. I got off the stage. I was like, the relief of being done. I was like, we did it. We came here. We're going to go have fun. I said, this summer, I'm going to unplug from work. What I didn't realize was exactly 27 days after I left the hospital, I did that talk. I literally still had a drain that had to be pulled a couple days before. Did my talk, told my kids, I was like, it's the worst talk I've ever given. So what I didn't know was 2 months later, that talk was going to go viral and it was going to change my life. And when I say it went viral, it was over 15 million views.
Wow.
And it changed everything in my business. Like my website crashed, my business just exploded. And I remember my husband looking at me and saying, like, no one would have questioned you not to do that talk because you had been so sick, but you did it to show the kids that you were okay. Because I wanted them not to worry about me. They were so stressed and worried. And so I just recall it's one of many examples. Like when I think back of trying times, and I just wasn't in my head thinking about myself. It was, what's the greater purpose? And it's reassuring my kids I'm okay.
Why do you think the talk was terrible? What was it? Like you got off the stage and...
so hard for myself. I mean, every time I went on TV, I was like, oh, it was like the worst interview I've ever done. I think because this particular venue was very strict. You had 12 minutes. And actually, a 12-minute talk doesn't sound hard, but it is.
Absolutely.
Really dive into too much. And I remember I looked up, there was this big, digital clock, and I looked up and I had a minute left and probably 5 minutes of talk I still had to give. So in my mind, I had to jump forward.
Yep.
Because it made it very clear, if you back up, then it backs everyone else up and no one ends on time, and then the audience is going to be pissed off, and it was this whole, so we were conditioned. So I jumped forward in the talk, and in my mind, I had forgotten important salient points that I needed to make. And honest to God, I walked up the stage, I looked at my coach, I said, that's the worst talk I've ever given. She said, don't ever say that again. So got off the stage and I was so relieved. I was like, okay, I've done my talk, check the box. So I think that is certainly an example of like showing up. No one would have questioned me not showing up.
Amen. And yet I did. Why do you think it went viral? When you look back, what was it about it that made it go viral?
It happened to be the most Googled nutritional strategy of 2019.
Interesting.
It was so fortuitous. And the irony is...
Because it was on intermittent fasting? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Women. Yep. They wanted me to do an intermittent fasting discussion focused on women because they said everyone complains we don't have any female-centric talks. So that was the other piece of it.
Wow.
Was that suddenly I was catapulted forward and like, you are this thought leader, you're this expert in intermittent fasting women. And I remember saying the decision to make the talk about that was literally, I looked at my husband in December of 2018 and said, what do I know a lot about? He said, fasting. And that was the decision. And so I pitched that idea to the group. And it was such a competitive TED Talk. And for people that may not be familiar with the process, not only do you have to make it through 15 different hoops to be selected, you actually have to demonstrate to them that you could get up on stage, articulate, and be able to have a persuasive discussion. And so it was so many things that fell into place all at the same time. Like to me, it was without question, that was a defining moment in my trajectory of my career and just even personally.
What'd your dad say after that? I mean, after you go viral.
Yeah, he was kind of like, what's a TED Talk? That was number one. What does that mean that you went viral? Like
Sure.
They don't, like, I think that generationally they're like, viral? What does that mean? It means a lot of people watched it, Dad. So we sat down and watched him. He was a very cerebral, kind of professor-like man, very conservative. And he was like, a lot of people watch this. He's like, have you read all the comments? I said, Dad, you don't read the comments ever. He's like, you might not want to read the comments. He's like, some of them are not nice. I said, Dad, welcome to my world.
Amen.
That's, if you're on social media, you have people saying things that are sometimes incredibly unkind and completely not constructive at all. So that was his thing. Have you read the comments? No, Dad, I prefer not to read the comments. He goes, good. I think that would be good for you. But he didn't understand the virality of it. Like, what does that translate into? Does that mean you get more business? Does that mean that you make more money? Does that mean that you have clout? Like, he didn't necessarily understand all of those variables. I think he was proud, but as someone who was probably on the spectrum, like, he didn't really get it. Per se, but he was definitely proud.
That's a really cool story, and I love it. I call them lily pads. Like, you have these lily pad moments in life where you get these lily pads, and it allows you to leap to the next lily pad, and then get that next lily pad. And when you reflect back just prior to the pandemic, how that one TEDx talk allowed you to jump to the next level, and all the great things you're doing now for so many people, men and women, all ages, is awesome to see. And then the more I dove into all that you're doing, Cynthia, since we reconnected, it's been cool to see the impact that you're having on so many people. So there's your quote to live by, my friends. With great risk comes great reward. And Cynthia, thank you for sharing that. Really, really awesome. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Cynthia talking about more intermittent fasting and healthset in a moment. Today's Impact Show podcast is sponsored by my friends over at eCore Athletic Flooring. My chosen brand when it comes to all of our flooring needs inside of Impact X Performance. My friends, there's 3 reasons why. Number 1, it's a premium brand, and we want our clients and members to have best in class when it comes to flooring. 2, sustainability. That's right, sustainability. It's made by upcycling used commercial tires, and eCore Athletic reclaims over 430 million pounds of waste rubber each year. Now that, my friends, is sustainability. And number 3, performance. And I love performance. With excellent shock absorption, slip resistance, and long-lasting durability, eCore Athletic Flooring is engineered to work hard and play hard. Whether you're designing or remodeling your fitness center, weight room, or yoga studio, rest assured that eCore Athletic Flooring is safe, easy to care for, and can keep up with the pace no matter what your activity is. Check them out at ecoreathletic.com/Todd-Durkin. Once again, check it out. I got a special surprise there for you. Go to ecoreathletic.com/Todd-Durkin. Check it out today. All right, Cynthia, let's talk about your expertise now, intermittent fasting. Now, we've all heard of it, and some of you have probably listened to her TEDx talk on intermittent fasting, but I know you're big on it. Can you break it down a little bit? Like, what is intermittent fasting if someone has not heard of it, some of the general rules, and who it's best for?
Yeah, so first and foremost, intermittent fasting is just eating less often. You know, we grew up in the days where we were conditioned to believe you eat snacks and mini meals and you do this to stoke your metabolism. Well, I'm the first person to say that is garbage advice. It has likely contributed to poor metabolic care in the United States. So when I think about intermittent fasting, it's helping people understand that there's a time in which you eat and there's a time in which you don't eat. It is that simple. We like to make it complicated. When I say we, as in a society, we like to make it complicated. It could be as simple as 3 days out of the week, a person decides that they are going to eat in a compressed feeding window, meaning they're going to have 8 hours out of the day. Maybe they have breakfast at 8, they ate lunch at 1, and they have dinner at 5. And that is, or that's 9 hours. But this compressed feeding window, as opposed to the average American is eating 10 to 15 times a day. Because
Come on,
of the sugars,
really?
beverages, snacks, the mini meals, yes.
Wow.
Yes. And it's interesting, if you look at even Sachin Panda, who's one of these big chronobiology researchers, he was even looking at an app that was tracking people's food intake, and they were consuming food 10 to 12 times a day. So most Americans eat too frequently and they eat the wrong food. So when we talk about fasting, now, first of all, it can be free and flexible, which means you don't have to do the same thing every single day. So let's just say you're someone that eats ad libitum, which means you eat whatever you want. I sometimes will encourage people to start with, don't eat after dinner until breakfast.
Yep.
Now, that is a period of digestive rest. And everyone, including my teenage boys, can have 12 hours of digestive rest. And I think if everyone did just that, we would be a happier, healthier society, right? If you wanted to take it a step further, you could go from dinner to 14 hours. So maybe you eat dinner at 6 and you have breakfast at 8.
Yep.
You can 14 hours of fasting. what people don't realize is most of the fasting is done while you're asleep.
Yep.
And I think once people understand that, then it doesn't seem like such an onerous, overwhelming task. Now, what's interesting is there are people out there who benefit from doing longer fasts, 1 day fast, 2 day fast, 3 day fast. There are specific circumstances in which I think that can be a good idea, but you have many listeners, just like I have many listeners that are athletes or they are working very hard. They need to fuel their bodies, which means 12 hours of digestive rest, you still get to eat plenty of food, but you're not in this catabolic state where you're constantly breaking down muscle. So when I'm talking about fasting as a strategy, it's always with the understanding of if you are an athlete, if you put in a lot of hours in the gym, you're very physically active, you may do fine with 12 hours of digestive rest, and that's totally okay. I do think there's a period of time we all benefit from not eating. The thing that I think about, the people who should not be fasting, if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, or you are in a position where you're trying to conceive, if you are a child or you're a teenager, you're still growing. That is not the time to fast. And I mention this because I get asked all the time. If you're someone who's recently been hospitalized, you've lost 15 or 20 pounds, you're frail, please do not fast. Your body needs food. In most other instances, people do quite well, unless, of course, if you have a disordered relationship with food, whether it's anorexia, binge eating, bulimia, that's a case where I would say if you were working with a therapist or psychologist and they have agreed with you that you are in a position where you can mitigate some of that strategy, that's fine. But I found that it can be very triggering for some individuals that have an eating disorder or have eating disorder behavior. But in most other instances, men and women can get away with a bit of fasting. The other caveat that I would add, and you have a young daughter, younger women, lean women, athletic women, not a fan. 12 hours of digestive rest is fine. But women that are still getting their menstrual cycle every month, people are still in their peak fertile years, it's important that they are attuned to the fact that their body is very, very cognizant of how much food they're bringing in. So you think about it, when people go through a famine, like a true famine, in many instances they stop menstruating. They're not able to become pregnant because their body has realized there's not enough resources. The same type of thing can happen if younger women, athletic, lean, healthy women are over fasting. And I see quite a bit of it. And this is where I will say there's a cautionary tale. The other piece that I would add to that, there's a time in a woman's menstrual cycle when they can get away with a bit more fasting than like right before they get their cycle. And without diving into the weeds, that's kind of the big caveat for women. Men, for the most part, and menopausal women that have gone 12 months out of a menstrual cycle, totally different. You know, they have less hormonal fluctuations day to day, week to week. But I think fasting can be a great strategy, even if it's something you use once or twice a week. It does not necessarily have to be something you do for the rest of your life, because you and I both know if you eat in a caloric deficit forever, that becomes another problem. And so I sometimes see the people that have been in a caloric deficit for years and they're like, I start gaining weight, I'm totally inflamed, I can't sleep, you know, all these variables start to kind of come up for them.
So you're saying
it's helping kind of re-engineer.
So you're saying 1, 2, or even 3 days a week is beneficial.
It is beneficial. I don't think people necessarily have to do it every day. Now, if someone is not metabolically healthy, and what does that mean? If someone is diabetic, insulin resistant, you have you're someone that's been told your triglycerides are high and your HDL is low. You've been told that you have a propensity of a very, we talk about it. I'm sure we had professors in college, but also teachers in high school where their pants would just keep getting shorter, and it was because their belly was getting bigger. So for men greater than 45-inch waist, women greater than 35 inches, that in and of itself is a sign that you could have metabolic syndrome. So people that we know are not insulin sensitive, people that are not metabolically healthy, probably can get away with a bit more intermittent fasting. But for those that are metabolically healthy, at a healthy weight, being cognizant of what's going on for them in terms of training load. Like my son who plays college lacrosse, that kid never fasts. He is constantly eating. And as I'm sure you know, these
100%.
It's like first dinner, second dinner, first lunch, second lunch. But we never want the message to be that we don't want you to fuel your body. That is key and really paramount.
Yep. And it's the same amount of calories you would eat spread out, but in a constricted amount of time, correct?
Ideally, yes. But what I find for a lot of people, in particular women, they get into their 40s. Technically, your metabolism, we're told, based on the research, doesn't change till we're 60, but things are definitely changing hormonally.
Yep.
And they're less hungry. So because they're less hungry, they're like, oh, I'm going to compress my feeding window. I'm going to have one meal a day in perpetuity. I'm like, you cannot sustain yourself on 400 or 500 calories for the rest of your life. Like, that is not a healthy kind of philosophy.
Yep.
So yes, it should be that you've compressed your feeding window and you are still consuming 2 to 3 meals a day. And if you are not, and you're doing the OMAD, which I get a lot of hate when I talk about this, OMAD is fine if you come back from vacation and you've eaten too much food. OMAD is fine if it's around the holidays and you've overeaten and the next day you're like, I'm going to get back on track. I'm going to have one meal and then I'll go back to my normal feeding pattern. What I find for a lot of people is that they just start chronically under eating. They're not doing it purposefully. They just get into a habit. They're like, I'm not as hungry. I hear that from a lot of women. I'm starting to hear it from quite a bit of men as well. I'm like, listen, you still need to nourish your body.
That's right.
There's no way that I could run a business and do the things I do and be as athletic as I am at this stage of life, eating one meal a day. Like I would end up catabolizing all my muscle, which is what most of us are trying to build up and not break down.
And if you're new to this concept, OMAD, as she's referring to, one meal a day on OMAD. Last question on intermittent fasting. What are the main benefits besides somebody like, oh, I need to lose weight, so I'm gonna fast, and that's one of them maybe. But what would you say are the top maybe 2 or 3 benefits of intermittent fasting?
Yeah, I would say most people come to intermittent fasting because they want to change body composition. But I would say beyond that, mental clarity is number one. People are sometimes surprised. That will keep them going because when they're burning fuel more efficiently, all of a sudden their brain lights up and they feel like they're much more mentally attuned.
Preach.
I would say number 2, having a degree of digestive rest. So many people walk around with bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, and they realize that is not normal until they're eating less often. So I would say digestive distress or digestive concerns. The other thing that I think many people maybe initially don't realize is all of a sudden they're fasting glucose, they're fasting insulin, their lipids, their blood pressure, inflammation in their body all improve substantially just by simply eating less often. So that can look like you go to see your provider and your blood pressure is improved. Maybe you get off a medication. Maybe you don't need as much lipid lowering drugs. Maybe you are noticing that your fasting glucose, so we're talking about metabolic health, is improving.
Yep.
And so because those are the things that I typically see, that those are the surprise, like patients will report that like this is the surprising improvement that I've seen. I would say those are the top 3 because those are so tangible. Like people understand that. As opposed to scientific terms like autophagy, which means this getting rid of disease, disordered organelles in the body. Like your mitochondria are the powerhouses of your cells, helping them understand like after the age of 40, we have more dysfunctional mitochondria, and intermittent fasting can be a way to get rid of these disease disorders. It's like taking out the garbage. That's the easiest way to make an analogy around it.
What do you do now, Cynthia? Do you do it 2 to 3 days a week and cycle where there's periods where you don't do intermittent fasting, or are you doing it into perpetuity for months and months upon months?
Yeah, if you would ask me this 4 years ago, I would say, Todd, I fast every single day. Last year, I got really serious about putting more lean muscle on. I'm an endomorph, so for me, it is harder for me to put muscle on. Like I'm just lean by nature. And I decided I needed to get more serious about trying to put on 5 pounds of muscle. And so I had this whole conversation with my functional med doc, and he was like, okay, you need to lift heavier weights, Cindy. You know this.
Let's go.
Exactly. I now have a trainer who kicks my butt several days a week.
Love it.
And so for me personally, I would say it's more digestive rest, which is that 12, 13 hours, which is still giving me benefits. People get so fixated, but you didn't go 18 hours, but you didn't go 20 hours. I am still having health benefits. I lift more, I eat more now, and I've not gained fat mass, I've gained muscle mass. So it tells me that I'm doing it the right way. So to answer your question, I don't do a lot of longer fasts. If I'm traveling and I'm in an airport where there's no good options, I will fast as opposed to eat junk.
Yep.
But I would say maybe 1 or 2 days out of the week, I'm actually doing something beyond 13 or 14 hours. And that is by choice. And that is because I'm really trying to get 3 boluses of protein in during the course of my feeding window so that I can build muscle. And you and I both know this. You get over 45-ish, it gets harder to build muscle. You need a greater stimulus. You need more protein to trigger muscle protein synthesis. So it gets a little more challenging, not impossible, but we have to work harder.
What are you?
My muscles need a bigger stimulus.
What are you trying to say, Cynthia? Are we getting older? Come on. No,
it's funny. I was trying to explain to someone one day, like my teenagers can look at a piece of steak and probably trigger muscle protein synthesis. And I was like, probably with 10 grams of protein, I need 40 or 50.
Right.
And so I am that deliberate. Like I'm the person when I'm in the steakhouse, I'm like, I want the bigger steak. Yep. Even if I don't finish it all, I want the bigger steak. Don't give me a 6-ounce steak before it's cooked.
Yep.
I want the 8 or the 10 ounce so that, I know that I'm getting that bolus of protein. And that's for everyone, men and women. Our hormones start to work a little bit to our disadvantage as we're navigating menopause, andropause, these things that are normal. We live long enough that they're going to happen, but I don't use that as an excuse. I just use it as an explanation to help understand the physiology.
It's a good topic. I'm literally coming off, as we're speaking, I'm coming off of a 21-day fast. So wow. Speaking of, I've never done that long. I've never gone longer than a week of any kind of fasting. And I'm literally on my last couple of days here of my 21-day fast. So this is a good topic of the intermittent fasting that I'm gonna do because of this conversation, because my wife has been on me to do more of the intermittent fasting consistently. But after this longer 21-day, I'm gonna report back, my friends, on the results of this. So I'm loving it, and great content right there. Speaking of intermittent fasting, the other hot topic I hear a lot about is gut health. And I know you've spoken a lot about it. I see your social media on that. Why is gut health the talk of the town now? Why is it so important?
Well, it's interesting. The gut microbiome, when we're talking about the microbiome, we didn't know anything about this when I was in my medical training compared to what we know now. And what's interesting is the gut microbiome, like when you and I were growing up, men and young women and young men, our gut microbiomes are very similar until puberty. So there's an influence of our sex hormones. For men, predominantly testosterone; for women, estrogen and progesterone predominantly. And then, there's a long period of time where our gut microbiomes are very different. And then, it comes back again in menopause and andropause. Things are more similar than they are dissimilar. But when we think about the influences on our gut microbiome, ultra-processed foods, chronic stress, alcohol, tobacco, whether we're over-exercising or not exercising, there's so many factors in our modern day lifestyles that impact the health of our microbiome. And it's as important as understanding that in our small intestine, which is part of our digestive system, the lining of the small intestine is 1 cell layer thick. It is that easy to get disrupted. And all those things I just referred to, ultra-processed foods, alcohol, stress, can disrupt that very delicate line of the small intestine. Sorry, it's a puppy.
Oh, I love it. What kind of pup? I love it.
We have a Bernie Doodle, and he's the cutest thing ever, but he is the patroller of the house.
Yes.
Hammy, come here.
I love
it. So what's interesting is you have this 1 cell layer thick of the small intestine, and if we're not managing our stress, eating all these ultra processed foods, drinking too much alcohol, it damages that lining, and we can actually leak food particles into our bloodstream.
Yep.
Food sensitivities and all sorts of opportunistic infections. And so when we look at the gut microbiome as a whole, we understand a whole lot more now about how we can support it, and also how we can damage it. And what that feeds into is it impacts bone health, it impacts immune function, it impacts how we process up our hormones. There's so much to the gut microbiome that most people don't realize. And there's this communication, this bidirectional communication between our guts and our brains. So many of us think, I'm sad, so it must be because my brain isn't making enough neurotransmitters. We actually make the bulk of our neurotransmitters in our gut. So there's this constant communication via a nerve called the vagus nerve. Yep. So for anyone who's familiar with that name of the nerve. And so keeping that nerve healthy is also very important. Things like humming and singing and gargling can all stimulate that vagus nerve. But the health of our gut microbiome is largely tied to lifestyle, as well as, the choices that we make with regard to food and stress management. Another example I'll use, the type of workouts I did at 30 are not the types of workouts I do now, which is not diminishing the stage of life I'm in, but I work out smarter, not harder, is what I always use. Is like, that's the vernacular. Like, I do HIIT training, but I don't do an hour of these hardcore CrossFit type classes that I did for whatever reason. I was trying to prove something to myself or someone else. But we understand that, like, if you're doing it, it's this Goldilocks effect. It's the right amount of intensity, the right amount of exercise, which is a little bit different for each one of us. But I would just mention that the gut microbiome is far more important than we give it credit to. We don't even have to think about it. Like, we can't see it, therefore we don't think about it.
Do you get that tested by your naturopathic doctor?
I do quite a bit of stool testing. So there are things that you can look at, keystone bacteria, which are very important. Looking to see if you have opportunistic infections. Looking at, I always refer to my patients, weeds in the garden, dysbiosis. Can you break down fats? Are you able to, do you have enough digestive enzymes or digestive fire? But yes, most integrative functional medicine providers can test for that. And I do think that there's a lot of value in testing because it can be incredibly insightful. And I would find most people are so disconnected from their bodies. Like, they're like, oh, I feel fine.
Yeah.
And then you start digging and you're like, oh yeah, I did have some gas and some bloating. And oh yeah, I always say you can't eat like an 18-year-old.
That's right.
Anymore.
Yeah.
Like, people don't want to hear that, but it's the truth.
Yeah, y'all have heard me talking about quarterbacking your own health, and I'm a huge proponent of at least twice a year seeing your naturopathic doctor. I've talked about functional medicine before. Cynthia is reassuring everyone the importance of quarterbacking your health. Obviously, you want your primary allopathic physicians and doctors on your team. Cynthia comes from a traditional medicine background as a nurse practitioner, but it's also talking about having that functional medicine doctor, naturopathic doctor on your team. If you don't have one, you need one, reach out to me, reach out to Cynthia. We've got a network of people that can help you, because you do have to quarterback your health these days. There's only one way to really optimize your health, and that's staying ahead of the curve. And what she's talking about with gut health is it's not a myth. It's not something that, it's just some people do. Everyone needs to be doing this so they can improve their health. When you talk about gut health, Cynthia, what would be some specific foods that one can eat so that they can optimize their gut health? Are there any specific foods that you recommend?
I would say number one, fermented foods. So whether you like dairy or don't like dairy, in fact, there's a fermented plum paste that you can get on Amazon. So I tell people, if you can't do dairy, you can't do yogurt or kefir, that's fine. But I think about fermented vegetables. I think about fermented plum paste. I think about miso. I think about things that there's been a bit of microbial diversity in these products. And a good example is you can go to Costco now and get sauerkraut, or you want a fermented cabbage. And a box or a canister of that could last you months.
Yeah.
So I remind people it's like 2 tablespoons with a meal. I mean, it is not a copious amount. Or if you really like, full fat organic Greek yogurt, or if you like kefir, which I don't do well with dairy, but I tell people, if you like, there are so many fermented carrots. I mean, you can ferment just about anything. I don't like a science experiment in my refrigerator.
I bet your boys love you. Come on, Mom, soften up.
How many people do you know? And I think it's awesome, but I have so many friends who they do everything themselves. And I don't want to open up my refrigerator and have a science experiment. Right. I prefer to just, buy my glass containers of fermented veggies, and we do just fine. But understanding that all of these fermented foods are providing, it's like fertilizer for the gut microbiome. Yeah. So that's number one. I would say really limiting or eliminating. I'm a realist. I understand, we travel, we do things, eliminating or limiting ultra processed foods, because we know the damage they do to the gut microbiome, because they're largely hyper palatable. They're designed for this bliss point. You're going to want to continue eating them. Makes it very hard to eat one Dorito. We grew up at a time where, it was like, it's very hard to eat just one Dorito or Cheeto or whatever, Funyuns or whatever it is. But those foods are not providing us with food nourishment. They're actually providing us with seed oils, high fructose corn syrup, I mean, it's like it is a food-like substance. So limiting ultra-processed foods, really focusing in on brightly pigmented fruits and vegetables. And when I say this, I remind people 3 vegetables to 1 piece of fruit. I'm not anti-fruit, but I find the bitter compounds in a lot of vegetables are actually important because they're not just a vegetable. Those bitter compounds are signaling molecules in the body. So when we talk about polyphenols, so if you have olive oil and the olive oil has a bite, that is the polyphenol. Those bitter compounds are sending important information to the gut microbiome. Just like radicchio, I mean, these bitter greens, people say, oh, I hate it. You don't have to eat a ton of it.
Yep.
Just we want to kind of bring these into our lifestyle. And again, not anti-fruit, but 3 vegetables to 1 piece of fruit. And I'm not talking about corn and potatoes, although, they can certainly have their place. I would say the other thing that I think is really important, and I've started coming out swinging on this because I think it is so important, is alcohol, like avoidance of alcohol. Sometimes makes me unpopular when I'm having these conversations, but helping people understand 1 glass of alcohol a day for a woman. And this is not suggesting that you never celebrate an anniversary, a birthday, a party. But I'm saying just in kind of broad strokes, 1 glass of alcohol a day for a woman increases your breast cancer risk by 7 to 10%. And I encourage people to just be mindful of their alcohol intake. You don't have to be a teetotaler, but I think for a lot of people, it's like understanding that a lot of what we were taught about the benefits of alcohol are actually now being disproven. And I can tell you, after witnessing the death of my father last year, I can tell you the conversations that I had with the neuroradiologist, the neurologist, the neurosurgeon. Alcohol does a lot of detrimental things to the brain. And my father was a long-standing alcoholic. So again, this is the extreme of the circumstances. But there were so many changes to my father's brain at the end of his life that were a byproduct of chronic alcohol consumption. So I think that I just interject that as being one of these things, just to be mindful of your alcohol intake.
Yep.
In terms of other things that I think are a benefit for the gut microbiome, stress management is really important. Like we talked a little bit about nutrition, but it goes without saying, even if you look at the research, managing your stress, and Todd, you and I understand this, that doesn't mean 5 minutes of meditation once a week, like really having a practice so that you are lowering your stress level. Like we lived in an unprecedented time 5 years ago with the pandemic. And I remind people like that was really a wake up call for all of us. Like what systems do we have in place to address stress? Because stress in and of itself breaks down our body.
That's right.
We know that
That's right.
cortisol is not a bad hormone, gets a bad rap, but in many instances, chronic cortisol elevation can actually impact immune function, can impact the way that our body processes nutrients. And so I just interject that as kind of like, another layer just to consider. Stress management is important for the health of the gut microbiome.
That's good. Really great information there. Thank you for sharing that about your father as well. Really, really awesome. And I like your three veggies to 1 fruit ratio. That's a good one for us to remember, right, everyone? As far as that ratio there. So thank you. What about with the gut health, supplement wise? Would you have, is there 1 or 2 supplements you're like, okay, there's 4 or 5 pieces of information what you should eat? Also think about supplementing with the following things to optimize gut health?
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple things. I mean, obviously when I'm looking at stool studies, I'm looking to see are there, specific targeted probiotics, whether it's a soil-based or a spore-based. And one thing to remind people is the reason why you take a probiotic daily is because it inoculates and then you poop it out. So helping people understand, sometimes it's beneficial to cycle through types of probiotics. So spore-based versus soil-based. That's number one. I would say the other thing that I think can be helpful, unless I'm looking at a very comprehensive stool analysis, is to think about just more fiber. And when you talk about fiber, we want to get it from food-based sources first. But I do think that there's value having some of these prebiotic fiber capsules, sometimes adding in, resistant starch, which we know our body can process up. Sometimes it's, green banana flour, sometimes it can be potato starch, and that seems kind of exotic and weird. But I remind people, again, it's like this fertilizer for the gut microbiome. Now, beyond that, sometimes people need additional support. Sometimes it can be L-glutamine. If we are really looking at beneficial things, there are some of these IgG products that are if you're not sensitive to dairy, that can be helpful. Again, targeted looking specifically at leaky gut. And beyond that, it's really looking on a case-by-case basis. But again, food-based sources and then kind of adding in these additional products can be very helpful.
Yeah, I like it. And are you married to any specific brands, or you just say, okay, look for those products? Do you have...
I'm a supplement snob, so I'll just admit that, because I probably like I now have as good a command of supplements as I do of pharmaceuticals. So if I'm looking at brands for probiotics, I'm looking at Megaspore, which is a spore based. They're very high quality.
Love it.
When I'm looking at brands for soil based, I'm looking at Clear Labs is one that I use quite a bit. And they have a wide variety of options. Both my kids and my husband and I take a probiotic on a daily basis. And then looking at resistant starch products, Designs for Health has, they call it paleo fiber. That's a nice option. I remind people that anytime you're taking a fiber supplement to go low and slow, because if you take the scoop, you will end up being, in most instances, a bloated gas bag, and no one wants that. So I would say, like, whatever they tell you to take a quarter of it. So if they tell you to take a full scoop, take a quarter and see how you respond to it. But for a lot of people, it's this understanding that these things in conjunction with the food can be very helpful.
So Cynthia, why do guys always double what they say to take? Right? You're saying to have it, and we're guys like, well, if they say one, I'm different. I need to take 3.
Well, I had my husband tell me recently that if one is good, 2 is bad.
Exactly.
That is the mindset. And I'll tell him, I'm like, when it comes to certain supplements, you don't want to be walking around telling me, like, I feel like a total gas bag because I just consumed far too much fiber. Because what actually happens when you consume all that fiber, the little microorganisms in your gut are just like gobbling everything up, and the byproduct is gas.
Yep.
And that can be very good.
That's good. All you guys just laughed out there because you know I'm right, because you're like, I got to double it. So Cynthia, again, thank you for giving us some good, very good, helpful tips right there for us men and women on that. Not to change gears, but staying in the health side of things. The big talk also is medicine 3.0, and I recently shared I did this heart scan, 3-dimensional heart scan, and medicine 3.0 is all about longevity. Share from your expertise, what is medicine 3.0, and how do you work with that philosophy now?
Yeah, I would say that I think medicine 3.0 is really taking the best of both allopathic and functional integrated medicine and personalizing it for each individual. Like you mentioned, a CT angio and looking more proactively at what are the things we can be doing. Like I've already had a coronary artery calcification scoring done, which is kind of like the light version of what you had done. But it was done to kind of be proactive. It's like looking proactively, it's looking preventatively. It's not waiting for problems to arise. It's kind of looking like, let's make sure we look under the hood. I'll give you an example. A traditional lipid panel, which is what most people are aware of, total cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL, LDL, that still has some value. But now we're looking a little more deeply. We're looking at things like an ApoB, we're looking at an Lp(a), which an Lp(a) should be done once for everyone listening. If it's low, then you never need to test it again. If you have a genetically high Lp(a) is really looking at oxidized LDL, the inflammatory LDL, ApoB is another marker, but that's usually done sequentially. You might look at it multiple times, but we know so much more now than we did 10, 15 years ago. We can be more proactive. If those markers are high, it gives us an opportunity. Look at that CT angio. Look at we call it a CAC. Looking at special carotid ultrasound imaging.
Big time.
Being conscientious, getting your colonoscopy. Yes, it is both screening and diagnostic, meaning it's one of the very few procedures where if they're in there and they see a polyp, they can take it out. At the same time, you don't have to schedule a second follow-up. So I think for a lot of us, it's being preventative and proactive as opposed to reactive, because in many instances, we've been in this reactive situation. We wait for people to get diabetes, we wait for people to have really bad asthma, we wait for people to develop coronary artery disease. Well, now this generation is starting to look at things differently. It's like, I want to live more healthfully, than our parents' generation did.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so good. I'm going to put you on the spot here. It's going to be a hard question to answer with all your knowledge and expertise, but if there was 3 to 5 things that most people need to do with their diets to really amp up their health, their energy, what is it? Now, it could be, the Medicine 3.0 proactive. It could be basic, like increase your water. But if you were to give, like Todd, besides just the most basic things, what are 3 to 5 things that most people need to do a better job with their nutrition?
Number one, more protein. I think most of us eat in a chronic protein deficit, and it's not a question of if, but when. After the age of 40, we start replacing muscle with fat mass. So let's give the example, like if you're a visual learner, a ribeye is a delicious cut of meat, right? But we don't want to become a ribeye. We want to be the filet. We want to be mostly muscle. And the way to do that is we have to, after 40, we have to be lifting weights, heavy enough weights, and we have to be eating enough protein. So protein intake, what does that mean? That means no less than 100 grams a day. Ideally, 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight.
Yep.
So I'm 120 pounds. I eat no less than 100 grams a day. And if I have a day, because I'll share this because I think it's important for transparency, I have a day that I'm traveling or I just can't get that third meal in, I have some essential aminos. I don't take them every day, but if I have a day where I want a buffer that I know I didn't hit my protein macros, I will take essential aminos. So protein is number one.
Yep.
Number two, without question, it's so simple, but hydration. I cannot tell you how many of my patients are chronically dehydrated. They don't sleep well, they're tired, they don't have enough energy, and it is all a reflection of being dehydrated. And Todd, fun fact, as women are losing estrogen, as they are getting older, their thirst centers in their body change, which means we sometimes don't realize we are dehydrated until we are dehydrated. So I think that it's important for men and for women, really aiming for, we just say half your body weight in ounces a day. I drink way more than that. Like I'm doing more than 60, but if you're trying to get a sense of an ideal to kind of aim for, if you're a guy that's 200 pounds, 100 ounces a day with some electrolytes. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to buy the super fancy, you could make your own at home, but adding some salt. And by that, I mean, don't go dump like iodized salt into your water, but like a pinch of salt, some magnesium, some potassium, all those things. There's lots of brands of electrolytes that are out there. Adding some electrolytes. If you're sweating, you're in a warm part of the United States, you and your clients are exercising hard and sweating a lot, you probably need some electrolytes. I would say number 3, more vegetables. And I know people just kind of go, ugh. Try something new. Try something beyond your broccoli or your cauliflower. And no, corn and potatoes do not count. I want you to eat something that's brightly pigmented. Like go to the grocery store and try something new every week. I don't care if you love it or hate it, but try something new. Like I tell my kids, pick 2 vegetables. I don't care what you pick. Pick 2 vegetables. And so we will steam a bunch of these things and we just have them at the ready. Like make it easy or make a salad. Like if you really want to help your gut microbiome, you want to eat, and I know everyone cringes when they hear this number, 30 plant varieties over a week. However, listen to me. If you have 2 to 3 salads a week, you can easily put 10 things in that salad.
Yep.
You could put jicama, you could put seeds, you could put herbs, you could put any type of plant variety that's out there into your salad and get away with your 30 plant varieties a week. I would say the last thing that I think is important is to not take yourself too seriously. And by that I mean, I love dark chocolate. It's like the one vice I have. I allow myself to have some dark chocolate every day. If there's something that brings you joy that is not derailing your diet, and there are health benefits to really high quality dark chocolate, enjoy the dark chocolate. But if you can't moderate the dark chocolate, then you need to pick some. I don't even care if you have half a cup of berries. Like if you would desire to eat something sweet, I think that is reasonable. I think we've gotten into a situation now where we've bastardized fat. We have bastardized carbs. We have bastardized people occasionally having an indulgent dessert or glass of wine or whatever it is that they're having. And I think I've learned to be a realist, because when I get too restrictive or if my recommendations become too restrictive, then My patients don't like that. And so I've learned, like, we have to have a little bit, it's like having guardrails up.
Yep.
Like, okay, we cut buffers here.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're giving me permission to continue to eat some chocolate-covered almonds on a daily basis. Is that correct?
It's not as it's a serving. When the bag is out, it's like, okay, the serving. Okay, so like that's the serving, right?
That's right. Melanie, I hope you're listening, because that's for you right there. Because Cynthia just gave me permission to have one handful. It's only like 12 almonds. That it's dark chocolate too. It's dark. No, you're absolutely right, Cynthia. I love it. I love it. That's good. That's good. I like it. How about a hack? Like, is there any other hack? They have all these biohacks. If there's one hack that peeps can use to really up their ante, what would it be if you have a hack that maybe you don't talk a lot about?
I'm trying to think, like a nutrition hack or just in general?
Any biohack.
I'm a big fan of things that have multi-uses. So people will say to me, how many supplements do you take? And I'm like, you don't want to ask me that question. But I do like things that have multiple uses. So something that I know in your world is popular as well as mine, creatine monohydrate. It is one of the most efficacious because it helps with strength. It helps with sleep architecture. It helps with jet lag. There's evolving research about bone health benefits. And so when I think about a multi-purpose, easy to take, relatively inexpensive, I like things that have multiple purposes. And I think for most adults in the north of 40 years old range, they're like, oh yeah, I know about creatine, but I think about it for strength training. Oh no, it's so much more than that. Sleep architecture, I don't know anyone in our age range that doesn't occasionally have some crappy sleep. So we know based on research, it's one of the most well-researched supplements that's out there.
Is it true that the body can only assimilate 5 grams of creatine per day, or is that a myth?
That's a myth. I've interviewed the experts multiple times. So you can actually, so it used to be that people would do these loading doses. I think when you're talking about muscle, I think 5 grams is perfect. When we're talking about crossing the blood-brain barrier, so we talk about this relatively impermeable barrier between our body and our brain. It's designed to keep toxins out. But if we want to take enough creatine to impact brain, so like sleep architecture, jet lag, I don't know about you, but I don't get jet lag, and I don't get jet lag because I take high dose creatine before I travel, when I come back. When about bone benefits, you need about 8 grams. So I think that when we're talking about dosing, it's like, what are we dosing for? If it's pure, like my gym bro kids, they're 5 grams all the way. When we travel, we know it's 10, and we know that makes a huge difference. It helps. We know that creatine helps with ATP production within the cell, but we know it can also help buffer the effects of that circadian disruption when we're traveling. Also, I've even taken it when I've been a little bit sleep deprivated, so that can also be helpful.
So good, so good. I've got one more important question, and before I get to the question, I'm going to take a short break so I can go pound some creatine and some hydration. So we're going to be right back right after we take a quick break. Oh my goodness, that's funny. All right, we're back. Cynthia and I just shared a hydration break and a creatine break. We needed that because of the content that she's dropping. And my last question when it comes to healthset and all the great information you're providing is there a question that I should be asking you that's hot on your mind that I'm not? Something that is maybe, I know you're writing your second book right now and you're going more in depth in the book, obviously, but is there a topic that is really near and dear to your heart right now that I have not asked you as it pertains to nutrition?
Oh, I would say, so it may seem like it's not connected, but sleep. We don't make good food choices when we don't sleep well. And I'm sure anyone that's listening has had a night where you've been out too late, maybe you drank too much, maybe you're just up late because of a work-related event. But the one thing that I find that a lot of people don't make the connection over is that when they're not getting a solid 7 to 8 hours a night sleep, not only is their blood sugar dysregulated, their leptin is dysregulated, which is like this appetite satiety hormone. You don't make good choices. When you're sleep deprived, you do not crave chicken and broccoli. You're going to crave the ultra processed foods,
Preach.
processed.
Preach.
etc. So I think that when we're talking about habits that are so important, this is why I hone in on like, don't major in the minors. It's like major in the big things, like get your sleep
So
dialed
good.
in, clean up your nutrition, manage your stress, because once you can dial in on those things, then you worry about I want to do cryotherapy and I want to do an infrared sauna and I want to, I've got the latest, greatest Brian Johnson hack of the world. Are you familiar with his work?
Yeah. Yep.
He's kind of extreme, but having said that, I always remind people that we really have to dial in on the majors before we worry about the minors. So sleep is a major. And if you're not sleeping well, irrespective of whether you're male or female, figure that out, because until you are sleeping well, you are not going to be able to make sustainable nutritional changes. You are going to be slipping and sliding backwards and forwards. I know when I'm stressed and I'm not sleeping well, I do not make good nutritional decisions. That's when I'm like head first into a gluten-free brownie. I'm like, what did I just do? Like, how did this happen?
But it's gluten-free. It's okay.
It's gluten-free. I said, no, but I feel bad. I feel physically sick.
Right.
I ate this really sugary thing, but I know that it is a direct reflection. So my sleep was augmented. And so I would say that is probably the missing link for a lot of people. And to be asking your clients, are you sleeping through the night? Because more often than not, when we're not asking those questions, it's like we don't get the full, it's like, why are you struggling to lose weight? Why are you struggling to, get with the program for a nutritional change?
Yeah.
Why are we struggling with, results in the gym, body composition, everything else? If you're not sleeping through the night, I tell people I cannot get you to lose weight. It's that important.
Cindy, I could not agree more. And I don't even think you know this because I didn't share it when we chatted. When it comes to sleep, and she says, do everything that you possibly can do to improve your sleep. One of those things is if you're not sleeping and you're trying all these different hacks on your sleep, if you read True Strength, folks, you listened to that, you read that, you know that in 2023, I got diagnosed with sleep apnea. I cannot recommend enough to go to your primary healthcare doctor and request a sleep apnea to get tested for sleep apnea. I thought you had to be old. I thought you had to be overweight. As my doctor said, man, I got Navy SEALs in their 30s with sleep apnea. And when I got diagnosed, I had 3.5 years of hell, as many of you know. And getting diagnosed was, I don't want to say the best thing that ever happened to me, but finding that out and having a solution has changed my life in so many ways. And I had a very tough 3.5 years going through that, not knowing I had sleep apnea because I wasn't sleeping. And not just because I wasn't eating, but I had multiple surgeries. I got the back injury and all that stuff. And Cynthia, you didn't know that. I'll send you True Strength, my book where I shared all of that. But I could not agree more. And I encourage all of you, as Cynthia talks about improving sleep. I'm not saying you have sleep apnea, but if your spouse, like Melanie was saying, man, you stop breathing in the middle of the night, and I'm being a knucklehead and saying, oh, honey, I'm just being polite. I don't want to be loud when I snore. That's not good. So fellas, ladies, make sure you get tested if you are trying to do everything and you just feel exhausted, fatigued, burnout, because that led to burnout for me because it was the pandemic and I was giving so much of my energy, but I wasn't sleeping. And that was one of the best things that happened to me is getting diagnosed. I hate to say that, but I couldn't agree more, Cynthia. I don't know how much experience you have with sleep apnea, but man, it rocked my world.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, you probably don't know this, but before I left clinical cardiology, I was in cardiology as an NP, both inpatient and outpatient for 16 years. And I cannot tell you how many of our patients so in our cardiology practice, we ended up bringing in sleep experts because we had so many patients. And we used to use this rule of thumb. When we walked into a patient's room in the hospital, we would look at their neck. We said, what's your neck size? And if they said 17 or larger, they automatically got referred if they told us they had any issues with sleep. But more often than not, you can be a very healthy weight, healthy sized individual like my husband, who's like 175 pounds and like 6 feet tall. And he has been fighting getting a sleep apnea study. But I tell him, I'm like, listen, once you get diagnosed, you don't, to me, like now you don't necessarily have to go into a formal lab. They can actually test you at home.
That's exactly right.
The technology has come light years But for so many individuals, they walk around not realizing their quality of life could be so much better. And what people don't realize is untreated sleep apnea can lead to high blood pressure, can lead to heart disease, can lead to diabetes. I mean, it is like a domino effect.
That's right.
In terms of metabolic health markers. And so I'm so glad that you got the information that you needed. Do you have a CPAP or a BiPAP?
CPAP. Yep. Matter of fact, it was your colleague, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, who is the one who I was at a conference down with Rory Vaden. It was a small meeting, and Gabrielle, who I know well, she said she knew what was going on with me. She goes, by the way, what size neck do you have? And I said a 17 and a half. She goes, stick out your tongue. I stick out my tongue, and she looks at my ears. She goes, oh, you have sleep apnea. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, how do you know? And she goes, oh, I know you do, because you just told me your symptoms and your neck size, and I guarantee, go home back to San Diego, get tested. I guarantee 100% you have it, and I'll help you with that. She's the one that I went finally to my primary and said, I think I have sleep apnea. Can I get tested? Because I had already gone to my primary and said, I'm exhausted, I'm fatigued, I'm burnt out. And they said, well, you're stressed because of the pandemic. You're trying to do too much for the industry. And I was just like, okay, I got to sleep better. Well, yeah, you got to sleep better, but I had a problem, and as you just said, it leads to heart disease, and I had that in my family. My father died of a heart disease, a heart attack at 58, so I know that it's called the silent killer. It is the silent killer, and if I didn't get, basically, that wasn't detected, you die of a heart attack. Some days like, oh, Todd died of a heart attack. No, I didn't die of a heart attack. I died of that sleep apnea, which caused excessive strain on the heart, and I get diagnosed with sleep apnea or with a heart attack, never knowing that I had sleep apnea the whole time. So I'm like, this is a hot topic for me. I want to get it out there even more, because how many people do I know that are like, man, they're working out, they're doing everything they can, they're eating right, or they're trying to adhere to these things you're talking about, Cynthia, and they're not sleeping because they have apnea possibly. So I'm just a big, big advocate of getting tested if you're not sleeping well and you're doing everything you can. So thanks for bringing that to light, Cynthia.
No, I think it's important, and there's no shame in that. I mean, I've even had a study done because my own functional medicine doc was like, you wouldn't believe the people I see sleep apnea. And so he's like, we have to make sure you don't have it. And so I recall being like, oh, this should be fine. But I think for a lot of people, it's a relatively straightforward, simple test with a straightforward treatment. And for a lot of individuals, I cannot tell you how many of my patients would fight me. And then when they would start wearing their devices, they're like, their blood pressure improved, their diabetes improved, their spouse was so happy.
100%. So. And you get your life back. Like, I feel like my life's back. I was dying. I was like, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt, and I was dying. I'm like, man. So thank you for that. And really, really good when you talk about sleep. And just because you're not sleeping well, please don't make it sound like you have sleep apnea. I'm not saying that. Cynthia's not saying that. I'm saying get tested if you're doing everything. And the worst that happens is you're good. You have to do the following things. But what was the other device beside the CPAP that you mentioned? I wasn't.
Oh, BiPAP. It's interesting. Some of it has been like over 25 years of being in medicine. Some things fall in and out of favor. At the beginning of my career, there were a lot of, it's called uvula palliatomy. They would go in and essentially like cut up your posterior pharynx and hope that would improve or they put dental devices in. And so over time, some things just fall out of favor. But CPAP is a great option. And for a lot of people, they sleep so much better. They're like, now I have people tell me like, I love my CPAP. It comes everywhere with me. I say, that's the purpose.
Yeah, there's a secret society no one knows about when you're on airplanes, because I travel with my CPAP, and you don't know what a CPAP, like all these guys and gals get on with there's like 20 people per flight that have their CPAP. You just give them a little wink and like give a thumbs up. It's like this secret society that no one knows about until you got your little CPAP. Oh man. Hey, I want to move into the third quarter. I want to talk personal, and not to get too personal, but I'd love to know more about your specific Cynthia Thurlow's high performance routine. Are there a few things that you do, whether it be personally, nutritionally, that allow you to function at a high level because you're balanced, you've got a lot going on business-wise, you're being pulled at all ends, and everyone wants you to be on your podcast, so thank you for joining us here. But what does your high performance routine look like? There's a few things you could share on that.
Yeah, it's funny. When I still worked in medicine, I was, either in the hospital or in clinic by 7:30 in the morning. So when I transitioned to being an entrepreneur, I had been used to getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to go to the gym. And it took me probably 2 years to not be up so early. I was like, this is crazy. So number one, I sleep till 7. I go to bed by 10 and I sleep till 7. And that is generally, unless I'm traveling, a non-negotiable. Number two, I do not get into email before 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And my team knows this, and I tell them, I'm like, if you need me, text me. But the first thing I do in the morning is we take our dogs out. We have 3 dogs. We live in a very hilly part of our state. We get sun exposure, we get light on our retinas, and it's just something we've come to crave. It's like time where my husband and I connect and we talk, and sometimes we're making fun of ourselves or the dogs. Because now we have teenagers, and like the dogs love being around us, and the teenagers depends on their mood. That's number one. I would say the other thing is, hydration first thing in the morning, but it's also like the understanding like my time is in the morning. So I invest in me before I do anything in my business. So that means I get my exercise in. That means if I want to lay on a PMF mat, if I want to do infrared sauna, if I want to do whatever it is that I need to do for me to put myself in the right mindset. I get grumpy if I don't do the walk in nature with the dogs, do my exercise. If I can't get those things done, I'm already grumpy. It's like I'm not even starting at a good baseline. Now, I go through periods where I'll meditate in the morning. I've come to find that I do better doing that in the afternoon. But for me, I try my hardest to not get on social media. A lot of people get on their phones immediately in the morning. I try to not get into social media, not to look at it. And I'm finally feel like I'm in the place of my business where people can be me on social media, unless it's like my personal, like I designate certain things as my personal. But I think that those are the guardrails that I develop. I don't talk on the phone. I don't do interviews. I don't do anything in my business until I have done my investment in me. I have showered. Depending on the day, maybe I have makeup on, no makeup on. I try to do as much no makeup stuff as I can, because I'm just at a point in my life where I just appreciate that more. It's like I only do it when I'm forward facing in my business. And I would say those are the things that for me personally are really important, that kind of set me up neurologically. They kind of, they helping to balance that autonomic nervous system, so I'm not so like, whoa. Like if I get up in the morning and I'm going at 100 miles an hour from the moment I get up to the moment I go to bed, as an introvert, that's incredibly draining. So a lot of my day is managing outward facing in my business and making sure I'm centered, grounded, otherwise. And obviously, I have one kid at home right now, so I didn't mention, but depending on his mood, because he's black or white. His world, he's very mercurial. Some mornings he's in a great mood and he wants to talk, and everything stops when he wants to talk. But some days he wants to just go to school. And so I'm just like, have a good day. Out the door. So it really depends on like, is he talkative this morning or not? But I think a lot of my day is really about being grounded and making sure I'm doing things that support me so that I can show up in my business and give 150%.
Would you say your evening routine is similar? Like you have a lot of personal self-care in the morning. Do you try to do that the last hour of your day is kind of the same? Yeah.
Some days it's meditation. Some days it's just reading a book. Some days I'm a very organized person. So part of my evening routine is that I'm organizing for the next day, so that when I come to my desk in the morning, it's not a cluttered disaster. Like for me, I'm like, okay, what are the 3 things? There's a book called Eat the Frog. I'm sure you probably have read it.
Absolutely.
I remember my first business coach said, you need to read this book. And I was like, oh, it's so brilliant. Like the 3 things you don't want to do the most are what you do first. And so those are the things that are on my plate for the next day. Like these are the 3 things I have to do to move my business forward that I don't really want to do, but I have to do. So let's just get them over with. And so part of my evening process is like, okay, let's just get organized for the next day. Let me look at my calendar. Let me triple check, make sure I know where I need to be, what I need to be doing. How do I show up? Oh, the other thing I would say is that I've learned is that, yes, as an entrepreneur, I can work 7 days a week, but I have one day on my calendar that is always devoted to my dental appointment. I have to go see this other doctor. I have these appointments, like things that are personal in nature, but my team knows I'm accessible, but I'm not looking at email. I'm not worrying about anything business-wise unless there's a catastrophic disaster. But doing that during the week as opposed to the weekend is so good. Again, that mental health piece of like so many people are like, oh, it's Saturday and I'm fighting the crowds. I'm going grocery shopping and I'm running all the errands. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, it's
I
smart.
just learned like Thursday is my day. It's like my very coveted day. My team knows not to put things on my calendar.
Yep.
Because I'm working, but it's like there's no forward facing stuff. It's just a get shit done day.
Yeah.
But it's during the week when most other people are not doing it.
Yeah, I like that because you're now working. You've condensed it into a 4-day work week, and then you have your time, and then your work comes into probably 4 or 5 hours a day of actual like focused time on the biggest tasks, the eat the frog tasks, like things you have to do and only you can do because you're the best in the world at these following things. And you've taken this schedule and put it into making your business work for your life versus most people taking their life and just kind of like the life works around all of the business stuff and you end up working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, probably like you used to. And now you've gotten to be a master of your energy, right? That's really, really awesome. That's good. Well, thank you for sharing that on the personal side. Guys, we're going to take our last break because in a moment, I want to come back and I want to finish with business talk. And she's talked about her team already. She's talked about leadership. I want to ask a few more questions about what Cynthia has done to really amplify her brand. And we'll be right back. Today's Impact Show is sponsored by Impact X Performance. Territories now available all around the country. Looking to own your own gym, partner with me, and create your own impact? Download the franchise information pack to learn all of the details at impactxfranchise.com. That's impactxfranchise.com, or simply click the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the show now. All right, we are back. We're talking business and leadership, and I am so thankful that Cynthia has joined the Impact Show today. And Cynthia, first off, thank you before we dive in. This is just awesome content, and thank you for sharing all that you are with us.
Of course.
You've talked about your team several times in today's episode. Can you share a little bit more about your team? Because you obviously have high esteem of your team because you've talked about them so much, and I know they're doing a lot of great things for you. Talk about who they are, what they do.
Yeah, so, I feel like I put my big girl pants on last year. It's like 2024, it was time to do the C-level people. I needed a COO, I needed a CMO, I had a CTO. And so, my COO is like a spoke in the wheel. I mean, she is the no BS, calls it like she sees it, allows me to function in my best capacity and deals with this organizational stuff. Like she manages the team. She, hires and fires. She presents me with opportunities, things that she's like, this is worth you spending time talking to this individual. But 99.9% of the stuff, she buffers all of it. My CMO is the one that drives strategy. She's the one that drives social media strategy, marketing strategy around programs, implementation, our supplement launch. She is, number one, the COO is the perfect personality for me.
Yeah.
She is a voice of reason. She is calm, cool, and collected, which is exactly how I am. And when I have moments where I say to her, my head just exploded, she knows what that means. And she knows exactly how to manage me saying that.
I love it.
My CMO is one of the most positive, can-do people. Like I'm really surrounded by positive, can-do people. They are not sycophants. Yeah. They will disagree with me. They will tell me what they think, but they do it respectfully. I have a couple of clinicians that are on my team. One in particular is a woman named Tessa, who is another advanced practice nurse, but she is, again, one of the most positive, thoughtful. She's kind of like the chief thought person. Like she just has a unique perspective and keeps all of us kind of moving forward. And we are the core. And then there's admin people. Obviously, they're important. We have podcast team people. But the four of us are the ones that come together every week because at the level that we are at, we're talking about, financials. We're talking about, projections, etc.
Business.
But Jamie, Jill, and Tessa, for me, it's the best team I've ever had, and they're incredibly trustworthy, but they are not sycophants. And anyone that's in a business you do not want to be surrounded by people who tell you what you want to hear. You want to be surrounded by people who are going to be honest with you when they need to be.
Are they virtual, or are you all in the same location?
We're all virtual. Yep, we're all virtual, which is beautiful, because the thing to remember is, now I think the pandemic has demonstrated to so many of us that we can function optimally, and do it in a way that just makes sense. So we have a team retreat every year. Like that's an important thing for all of us to come together. But ironically enough, we're almost all in the same time zone, which helps. But in some instances, we have people in other time zones, but they're the core of my team. But they are by far the best team I've ever had. Like, it's taken a bit of time, as you know, to get the right people.
Did you, and that's the hardest part, because people always ask that, right? Did you use a recruiter to find like your COO, or how did you find that person?
It's funny. She actually started, like, her background was in that, but she kind of had pivoted from the previous occupation she had been in and started as an admin. But it was clear to me, like, very quickly, this is someone who's very tech savvy, that is, has been in a managerial position before. And so what I did was I actually hired a specific business coach to train her to be ready to step into that. And that was a great decision, because he sat over her for about 4 or 5 months. And then he said, she's ready to rock and roll. And so that was a great investment. And
what was the determining factor in 2023, 2024? It said, I gotta change my organization. I gotta hire a COO and a CMO. Like, what was it? Like, did you get overwhelmed? You're like, man, I'm not doing what I love to do, or I'm not maximizing. Was there like a moment you had, man, like, I got to get to the next level?
I think there were financial goals that had been made. So I hit that 7-figure mark, which for me, as a nurse practitioner, I mean, I'll be completely transparent. I kind of personally giggle, because I used to work for physicians who made, like, the discrepancy between the physician and P salary was so tremendous in this cardiology group. Like, I'll give you an example. They would say, we gave you $100 bonus. And I'm like, I know what I brought in this year for this practice. You gave me $100 bonus. That didn't cover groceries. Right. So for me, like, personally, that was incredibly gratifying to be able to say, like, I'm a 7-figure business. So number one, it was a financial, but it was also the realization, like, I felt like I couldn't hang on to all these pieces that like, someone needed to be the spoke in the wheel. I didn't necessarily know what I needed, but my business coach said, oh, this is when you need a COO. And so my business coach was instrumental in bringing that to my awareness, that the business was too big to not have someone really running all these different pieces. Because I'll be honest with you, you know what I don't do a good job with? I am a reformed people pleaser, but I don't like firing people. It's probably one of my least favorite activities, but it is necessary in business. And when I need to be decisive, I can be. There's no question. I can be very direct. It's sometimes, that's the New Jersey.
I was going to say, you're a Jersey girl. What do you expect? I love it.
It's very off-putting. Like, they're like, you look very sweet. And then you're like, you swoop in and you're like, no,
get it.
This is unacceptable. So I had a couple situations like that. And I was like, oh, okay. Now we need to be like, what's the next thing we need to do? So it's all about creating legacy, but also being smart financially. And so that's, I would say that was the two things, a financial, and then the realization that there were too many things that I was focusing in on, which didn't allow me to focus on my zone of genius predominantly.
Yep. Which I was going to ask, because your CEO is handling a lot of the operations, your CMO doing an amazing job, and I've noticed, how the team is engaging with all your social media, whether that's you and them. It's grown tremendously over the last couple of years, obviously, with your CMO. So my question is related to what you just said. Where are you spending your time? Where is your zone of genius? What are those 2 or 3 things that Cynthia does and only you can do?
Yeah. So I would say number one, podcast. Like, there are things that I know that I do better than anyone else with the podcast. And that's why the podcast has grown and it's done so well. And like, no one on my team does my podcast prep. Someone tried to suggest to me outside my team, oh, just feed that person's book into ChatGPT. And I said, no, because then I'm not reading the book. And if I'm not reading the book, then I'm not going to ask the questions the way I want to ask the questions.
That's right.
And they looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, no one reads the books. I was like, I read your book. Like, I read everyone's books from start to finish.
Love it.
So podcasting, I would say the other thing is public speaking. Like I do quite a bit of public speaking and events, and I do that. And that, I love that. I love meeting people. I love helping people. I love speaking on a stage and inspiring people to take control of their health. I would say the third thing right now is the book, which, as I said before, my first book was easy to write. This one has not been. And that's for a variety of reasons. It's because life happened in between all these deadlines with the book. And so I was just like, I've hit every milestone. I've done every single speaking event. I've done all of my travel amidst 3 family members dying, my husband being hospitalized twice and having a big surgery in December. And I did it even taking time off. Like I took weeks off when my husband got sick. Weeks, like not just one. It was clear my calendar. Everything, nothing is as important as what I'm doing right now. So those are things I tend to focus on. Secondary to that, the book is moving off the plate, and then I'll get a little bit of a break before the book launch. The supplement line, like it's really been like, what are the things I want to bring to and envision? But my team does the writing and the technical stuff. I give them direction and then they just run with it. So I've gotten very clear about where my guardrails are. Like, what are the things I do best? And then I hand stuff off. Like,
I love it.
Here you go.
Yeah. And you know your window of time when you're working, which is that's what it's all about, of how you get to that level and why you have your team. I like that. I like that. And your podcast has grown a lot, right? Your whole presence has grown a ton. What's the name of your podcast so if someone wants to listen in?
Everyday Wellness.
Everyday Wellness. Yeah. And your first book, the title of that first book is?
The Intermittent Fasting Transformation, which ironically is the name of the second TED Talk. So that was the spin. My publisher liked that, and I realize now that when your title is clever, which mine is not, that makes it easier for people to find it. So I always jokingly say, like, there's lots of little things I've learned, and I've also worked with Rory. So I've learned the clever things, and I'm like, okay, next book launch, totally different.
100%. And what's the title of the second book that you're working on now and finishing up?
The Midlife Pause. So it's a play on perimenopause, menopause, that pause piece, but it is the name of my supplement line, it's the name of my book, it's the name of, I want it to be a lifestyle brand. So that is like, I'm thinking bigger this time around. And so someone said, you need to change your podcast title. And I said, no, I'm not ready to do that. Because right now it has name recognition, and if I change it, then it's going to be that whole, I'm not ready to do that. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid.
Totally, I totally get it. And sometimes you know that you got to, but you're like, nah, I'm not just ready for it yet.
I think that's probably coming, just for continuity, but much smarter this time around about, some of it's ignorance is bliss in many ways. Like it was the pandemic and I was writing a book and I was in my little, we had sold a house and we're living in a rental and building a house. We were in this beautiful little cocoon. And, now it's business is in a different place. So it's a little bit harder.
Last leadership question I have in that, and if there's the toughest thing that you do that no one knows that you actually do, what is it? What's that thing that, people just don't know? Because, man, Cynthia's killing it. She's social media is crushing. She's speaking. She's doing all these things. So on the outside world, it looks like, hey, she's got it all going on. But there's always something that is the thorn in your side. Like, man, I got to do a better job here. What's the toughest thing you deal with?
This is probably going to sound surprising, but I am an incredible introvert. So it is easy for me to have an intimate conversation one-on-one. So easy because as an NP and a nurse, like you're constantly interacting with people. But when I go to events, I have to get myself so mentally ready that I'm going to be, because I want to go and I want to be that person that you can talk to after my talk. I want you to feel like you can approach me. I want to always be that person.
Yeah.
But as an introvert, I don't get my energy from necessarily being in that big room. I enjoy it.
Yes.
I enjoy it at the time, but it can be like draining. And I don't even want to sound unappreciative because that's not what I'm saying. But as an introvert, that is something I have to constantly work about, managing my energy and like being in a position, like the amount of stuff I do mentally so that I am like able to be like 2 to 3 days and be at 100% because I never want to be that person that I meet at an event who I think is awesome online, and I meet them and they are a big jerk.
So true.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. Thankfully, it has been the exception and not the rule.
Yep.
But I realize how much when I approach someone and I'm like, I just want you to tell you how much I appreciate your work and what you do and the message you share, how much that meant to me to be able to connect with them. I never want to be that person who, and I'm getting chills thinking about this, I never want to be that person who doesn't give that individual that opportunity to say what they need to say.
Preach.
And it could be as simple as, I'm a fellow nurse, I really appreciate what you do. Or your story, your situation, your sharing changed my life. Like those kinds of things, like I don't ever want to demean someone's experience. So that's probably what people would be surprised to know. Like people will say to me, you're short, I didn't realize how short you are. And then they're like, no way you're an introvert. Oh yeah, way. I'm a short introvert. I'm short and I'm an introvert, but people are surprised to hear that.
You know, I hear out of that, in that when you're surprised as you're an introvert, I hear is the toughest thing that you do is you're getting outside your comfort zone, right?
Yes.
Like that's what you do is by getting outside your comfort zone and putting yourself in a situation where you're not comfortable, that's allowed you to connect with so many people because you do an amazing job doing that, but no one may know that you're an introvert and you're not comfortable with it. So kudos to you on that because like you said, you're aware of that. You have to psych yourself up to go out there. I'm the other way around, right? In the sense of an extrovert, like I breed off of live events. I breed off of the speaking and that feeds my soul where you're saying, man, I got to get way outside my comfort zone to get into that situation. It gives me a little angst, a little bit of anxiety on that. So thank you for sharing. Last overall question. This is the Impact Show. So legacy, you said it. What's your legacy? What's your impact that you're looking to create in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I would say personally, I want my boys to know that playing small is not an option. Like when my older son was looking at engineering schools, and at one point he considered not studying engineering because he knew he would have an easier time getting into certain schools. And I looked at him and I said, I never want you to pick the second choice. Do you want to study engineering? He said, yes. And I said, then that's what you're applying to. You're not doing, I mean, like, you know, he got into Purdue, he got into the top engineering schools. I was so proud of him. And I remember saying to him after the fact, Jack, I just want you and your brother, I want you guys to push yourselves, like get outside your comfort zone, not to play small. So that's my legacy of my children, making sure that my kids grow up to be strong, independent, smart young men. I would say my other big legacy is I tell everyone, like, I was meant to be married to Todd. I was meant to be Jack and Liam's mom. And the other thing I was meant to do is the work I'm doing today. Because not only am I an example to other nurses and nurse practitioners, which I am such a proud nurse, but it's also showing other women, like, you can navigate perimenopause and menopause and do so in a way that you still have a high quality life. Unfortunately, it's like if you listen to the discourse that goes on social media, it's like you fall off a cliff. Like you fall off a cliff and then so my legacy is going to be my evolving brand, this evolving platform for women to amplify their voices, to feel educated, inspired, and empowered, and to do so in a way that's like research-driven, actionable, positive. You know, for me, I don't like scare tactics. That's just not part of who I am. It's let me give you information. It's like, I'm going to teach you how to fish. I'm going to teach you how to go to your doctor and tell them what you want, the things that you need. And so I think that there's still such a dearth of information. I think this age group of women, we're having a moment, which is great, but there's so much more work to do. And so when I think about, like, when I reflect on my lifetime of work, it is what I'm doing now, which I know is going to be generational impact. Like I tell my boys, I'm like, I'm going to leave you guys with something tangible. Like it may not be what you yourself want to put your hands into, but like my kids are involved in my business, Todd. Like they have job descriptions, they're involved in my business. It's allowed me to invest in like Roth IRAs and retirement accounts. Like I'm doing that already for them. And I'm like,
love it.
intergenerational because it's so important to me.
Mm.
And I feel incredibly fortunate because these weren't things that my parents were able to do. And that's okay.
Yep.
Because I wouldn't be who I am if I had grown up any differently.
That's right. That's right.
But I'm so savvy. I'm so savvy with, my investments and my CPA, my financial, like all these things that I'm doing so that we're like a rock solid movement forward business and feeling like I'm still leading with integrity. Like I think that for me is huge. I know that we share this, but everything we do in our business, we lead with integrity. Like that's why, my customer service is so important. Like as another example, I know we didn't talk about this, but the podcast, our sponsorship, our relationships, it's all about customer service. I said, if you think this is a sales job, then you're not the right person because this is all customer service. We want to develop lifelong or long-standing relationships. We want people to feel like they're getting as much as they're giving. We want only the sponsors that we feel like are really in alignment with our community. Like really leading with integrity is so much, it's a value set. Like we created a set of values as a business, like all of us at one of our retreats. And anytime someone doesn't live up to our business values, they're gone.
That's right. That's right.
There's no second chance that poof, you're gone.
We are so aligned in so many ways. Like it must have been something in the water at Brick because same exact feeling of you, and congratulations and all that. And thank you for sharing about Jack and Liam and your legacy, because I love seeing what you're doing. And before we close out, if anyone listening today wants to follow all you're doing, you already have a book out. Go to Amazon, get that. You got your next book coming out here within the year. But if someone wants to follow you, where's the best way they can follow you, get a hold of your team? What's some of that information, Cynthia?
Oh, thank you, Todd. It's such a pleasure. And I agree with you. There's something really special about the Jersey Shore.
No doubt.
I jokingly will say to people, the Jersey Shore.
The Shore.
I think we probably both have like the resolved Jersey accents, but it is such a special place. And I'm so very fortunate to have grown up there. I would say if you want to get a good sense of who I am and who my team are, probably Instagram is the best place to start. I also have a free Facebook group. It's called the Midlife Pause / my name on Facebook. Yes, it is on Facebook, but it's a vibrant community of almost 13,000 men and women are both in there. There are men in there because they want to better understand what their wives are going through. It's a very nurturing, great community. If you follow me on Twitter, sometimes I'm snarky. I have to forewarn. Like people say, "Oh my God, you're totally different on Twitter." Yeah, I am.
Totally.
I'm very snarky.
I get it.
Totally different. And then I would say, all of our podcasts are up on YouTube. YouTube is small but growing. And then obviously Everyday Wellness is my podcast, and it is my passion project. It is my favorite thing I do in my business, largely because I love to learn about people. Like I would never have been a psychologist, but I love being able to ask people about, how did they get to where they are? What motivated them to write the books that they write or do the research that they do? And how is it applicable to my community? It's always going back to how is it applicable to my community? So those are really good ways. Obviously, website, you can get connected to all that. So just my name, www.CynthiaThurlow.com with a T. Sometimes people think I say furlough. I'm like, no, not a prison furlough. Thurlow with a TH, like thermometer. But yeah, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to connect with you today.
Guys, check out all of that, please. And when she says CynthiaThurlow.com, THURLOW, I'll put all of that in the show notes. But when you see that, check her out. The podcast, Everyday Wellness. Keep your eyes here because she may change the name at some point, not yet, but Everyday Wellness. And then the Facebook group, a great way to join her community, which is a very vibrant community, Midlife Pause, and then / Cynthia Thurlow. Again, it's a THURLOW on that. So check out all of that. I'll put it in the show notes. But Cynthia, thank you for your time. It's so good to see you. It's like stepping back to like our middle school days. It brings me again, it gets me emotional thinking back to those days and seeing all the great things that you're doing. A brick girl done great. And it's great to connect with all you're doing and your community. So thank you so much for today and the content. If there's anything I could ever do to help you and your community in any way, please let me know how I could help.
Likewise.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thanks.
Wow. Oh, wow. My friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I am just so grateful and thankful for Cynthia and the time she gave us today. We had a great talk before the show, we had a great talk after the show, and we had one heck of a show. Can I get an amen to that? If this was of value in any way and you like today's episode, can you please do me a favor? Can you please head over and give us a 5-star rating and write a review? It really helps us. And having people on like Cynthia, typically we do a lot of solo episodes, but I've committed to at least once a month having guests like Cynthia that bring so much content to the game. If you can share your takeaways over on Apple and give us that review, give us that 5-star rating, and share it with your friends. Please copy the link to this podcast and share it with your friends and family and have them listen in, because you want to follow Cynthia and all she's doing, and we want to get this word out there so we can impact more people around the globe. So thank you for listening in. I can't wait to see you again, but get out there, have an incredible day, and don't forget, train hard, eat right, live inspired, and go create impact.